So we've been working with string data in Python. We've also worked with numbers, different data types, and we've been printing things out. And we've been doing it kind of the old way, the classic way in Python. For example, if we look at this code here, if we set a variable name with the value Alice, then we got the friend is Bob, day is Tuesday, minutes is 60. That's an integer, of course. If we want to make a message, what do? We have to combine a whole lot of strings. So we have quotes on plus day plus comma quote plus name. It gets really confusing to look at this code and see where the quotation marks start and end. Is the plus inside the quotation mark or is it between? It just gets confusing. The code's a little bit messy. And of course, because minutes is an integer, we have to convert it to a string so that we can combine it with other strings. It's just a lot. So a new feature that's been available in Python since Python version 3.6, which has been out for a bit now, we can use a feature where if we put just the letter F outside of that first quotation mark, that tells Python, okay, this is a special string. It means inside this string, we're going to put variables. We can put Python code inside that string, and Python is smart enough to say, okay, what is the value of day? I'm going to print out the value of day. I'm going to print out the value of name and friend, and even minutes. Python will say, all right, that's an integer. I know I need to convert that to a string. I'm not going to make the coder do any of that work. So in my opinion, this code right here using an F string is much more readable than the code above that just concatenates everything using plus. Both methods work, but increasingly we see the second option using F strings used in a lot of Python code today. So let's start our interactive shell. I'm here in PowerShell, so I'm just going to run Python to launch it. And I'll set an IP address. So this is just a string, 10.1.2.15. Make sure to include those quotation marks. And then I'll just put F to say this is an F string, quote. The IP address is curly brace, IP, curly brace. Now Python is going to look for a variable with the name IP. So I need to make sure that that is set. So when I run this line of code, Python inserts the value of that variable into where those curly braces were. So nice, so nice. Our code is getting easier to read. So let's do another example. Let's use an integer, age equals 5. And I'll use an F string F, quote, my sister is curly brace, age, curly brace, years old. So I didn't have to convert that integer into a string. Python did it for me. So that's nice. That's going to help us make fewer errors. Let's take a look at this next example, though. This is going to get a little bit not stranger, but we should pay attention to what we're doing. If we have a fraction equals 2/3, so that's going to be a decimal number. But how many decimal places is Python going to give us? Well, let's take a look. If we do another F string, put the variable name fraction inside those curly braces. Fraction of the pie has been eaten. And we run it, it tells me, okay, 0.66666666, repeating of the pie has been eaten. Maybe we don't need that many decimal places. We probably don't care to the 12th decimal place how much of a pie has been eaten. So we might want to round that number off. And so F strings, they can do this for us. So I'm going to type that code again, but add one specific thing. So I'm going to type F to tell Python this is an F string. Fraction, the name of the variable, But now here's where I'm going to define the format that I want to use. I'm going to put a colon here and say period 2. That's 2 decimal places. Of the pie has been eaten. I started with double quotes, so I'm going to end with double quotes. I'm not going to get thrown off by that single quote right above my cursor right there. So when I run this, that's a much friendlier output. 0.67 of the pie has been eaten. Maybe I should have said percent. I didn't, but hey, there we go. We get it. So let's do this challenge now. So let's create a file, madlib.py, and let's practice using f-strings. I can exit out of my interpreter here. Clear my screen if I'm done with all that stuff. I've got Visual Studio Code running over here. I'm going to close any open files, and I'll create a new file called madlib.py. So new file, madlib.py, and Visual Studio Code will open it for me, so that's great. So use the input function to prompt the user to input 2 adjectives, 2 nouns, 2 verbs, and an adverb. All right, so I'm going to create a lot of variables here. So adjective 1 equals input. Please enter an adjective. I'm going to hit escape to get rid of all the hints Visual Studio Code is giving me. Adjective 2 equals input. Please enter another adjective. You know, I'm going to put some colons in there and a space, so it just looks a little bit neater when I run it. I want 2 nouns, so noun 1 equals input. Please enter a noun. Noun 2 equals input. Please enter another noun. 2 verbs. So verb 1 equals input. Please enter a verb. Verb 2 equals input. Please enter another verb. Now you can name these variables whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. This makes sense to me. And an adverb, just one. Adverb equals input. Please enter an adverb. I want to be polite to my users, so I'm going to say please to them rather than commanding them to do something. Use f-strings to combine the variables into a brief string. Print that string to the terminal. So I'll call it whatever you want. Story equals f, that's important. And so I'm going to create a story here. The adj1 noun 1 Notice the highlighting here is helpful in Visual Studio Code because Visual Studio Code knows this is an f-string. It's making sure my variables are highlighted here, so that's nice. Verb 1, adverb, to the adjective 2, noun 2. All right. I'm keeping it brief just to keep the code on my screen, but I've got the closing quotation mark there. Did I use all my stuff? Yeah, I used my nouns, my verbs, my adverbs. Now I will print my story. So let's run this code, see if it works, and I'll do it right here in Visual Studio Code just by clicking that play button to run the Python file. Should run, I'll come down here to the terminal, just click inside there, enter an adjective, fun, another adjective, grumpy, enter a noun, bunny, enter another noun, table, enter a verb. I'm going to make these past tense. Slumped, another verb, jumped, adverb, slowly. All right, then I get my message. The fun bunny slumped slowly to the grumpy table. All right, you can make your story as creative as you would like. But this code in this F string just makes things easier. It's easier to read the code, which means we're going to make fewer mistakes. When code is easy to read, coders produce better code. We want to help ourselves out. We want to write code that makes sense to us, and if we're writing this code for an organization, we want to make sure that the code makes sense to the person who has to inherit this code, make changes, and expand it. So there's lots of ways to format numbers and things and dates. There's lots of ways to use F strings to format the output, and the Python documentation is good. Oftentimes you can search for examples if you're looking for a very specific format, but the principles are the same. We put the F before our quotation marks. We put our variables inside those curly braces. And if we need to change the formatting of something, we would use the colon and then followed by that format. So this is the way, if I have to print something out and I need to incorporate variables in those statements, I'm going to be using F strings anytime that I'm writing code in Python.